Exile means to be away from one's home, while either being explicitly refused permission to return and/or being threatened with imprisonment or death upon return. It can be a form of punishment and solitude. It is common to distinguish between internal exile, that is, forced resettlement within the country of residence, and external exile, deportation outside the country of residence. Although most commonly used to describe an individual situation, the term is also used for groups, or for an entire government. Terms such as diaspora and refugee describe group exile, both voluntary and forced, and government in exile describes a government of a country that has been forced to relocate and argue its legitimacy from outside that country. Exile can also be a self-imposed departure from one's homeland. Self-exile is often depicted as a form of protest by the person that claims it, to avoid persecution or legal matters, an act of shame or repentance, or isolating oneself to be able to devote time to a particular thing. Article 9 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights states that no one shall be subjected to arbitrary arrest, detention or exile. For individuals, exiled heads of state, in some cases the deposed head of state is allowed to go into exile following a coup or other change of government, allowing a more peaceful transition to take place or to escape justice. Examples include, avoiding tax or legal matters. A wealthy citizen who departs from a former abode for a lower tax jurisdiction in order to reduce his tax burden is termed a tax exile. Creative people such as authors and musicians who achieve sudden wealth sometimes find themselves among this group. Examples include the British-Canadian writer Arthur Hailey, who moved to the Bahamas to avoid taxes following the runaway success of his novels Hotel and Airport, and the English rock band the Rolling Stones who, in the spring of 1971 owed more in taxes than they could pay and left Britain before the government could seize their assets. Members of the band all moved to France for a period of time where they recorded music for the album that came to be called Exile on Main Street, the main street of the title referring the French Riviera. In 2012, Eduardo Saverin, one of the founders of Facebook, made headlines by renouncing his U.S. citizenship before his company's IPO. The dual Brazilian-U.S. citizen's decision to move to Singapore and renounce his citizenship spurred a bill in the U.S. Senate, the Expatriate Act, which would have forced such wealthy tax exiles to pay a special tax in order to re-enter the United States. In some cases a person voluntarily lives in exile to avoid legal issues, such as litigation or criminal prosecution. An example of this was Exile Nadir, who fled to the Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus for 17 years rather than face prosecution in connection with the failed £1.7 billion company Polypec in the United Kingdom. Avoiding violence or persecution, or in the aftermath of war, examples include Iraqi academics asked to return home from exile to help rebuild Iraq in 2009. Jews who fled persecution in Nazi Germany. Palestinians who fled bombardment from the nascent Israeli state in 1948. People undertaking a religious or civil liberties role in society may be forced into exile due to threat of persecution. For example, nuns were exiled following the communist coup d'état copyright tat of 1948 in Czechoslovakia. Nazis after 1945 fleeing persecution for war crimes, for example Joseph Mengele. For groups, nations and governments, nation in exile. When large groups, or occasionally a whole people or nation is exiled, it can be said that this nation is in exile, or diaspora. Nations that have been in exile for substantial periods include the Jews, who were deported by Babylonian King Nebuchadnezzar II in 586 BCE and again following the destruction of the Second Temple in Jerusalem in the year AD 70. Many Jewish prayers include a yearning to return to Jerusalem and the Jewish homeland. After the partitions of Poland in the late 18th century, and following the uprisings against the partitioning powers, many Poles have chosen a euro, or been forced a euro to go into exile, forming large diasporas, especially in France and the United States. The entire population of Crimean Tatars that remained in their homeland Crimea was exiled on May 18, 1944 to Central Asia as a form of ethnic cleansing and collective punishment on false accusations. At Diego Garcia, Between 1967 and 1973 the British government forcibly removed some 2,000 Chagosian resident islanders to make way for a military base today jointly operated by the US and UK. Since the Cuban Revolution over 1 million Cubans have left Cuba. Most of these self-identify as exiles as their motivation for leaving the island is political in nature. It is to be noted that at the time of the Cuban Revolution, Cuba only had a population of 6.5 million, and was not a country that had a history of significant emigration, it being the sixth largest recipient of immigrants in the world as of 1958. Most of the exiles' children also consider themselves to be Cuban exiles. It is to be noted that under Cuban law, children of Cubans born abroad are considered Cuban citizens. Government in exile. During a foreign occupation or after a coup d'état copyright tat, a government in exile of a such afflicted country may be established abroad. One of the most well-known instances of this is the Polish government in exile, a government in exile that commanded Polish armed forces operating outside Poland after German occupation during World War II. Other examples include the Free French Forces government of Charles de Gaulle of the same time, and the Central Tibetan Administration, commonly known as the Tibetan government in exile, and headed by 14th Dalai Lama. Tribes in exile. During the era of the Islamic prophet Muhammad, he exiled the Banu Qaynuq tribe during the invasion of Banu Qaynuq in February 624. Muhammad ordered his followers to attack the Banu Qaynuq Jews for allegedly breaking the treaty known as the Constitution of Medina by pinning the clothes of a Muslim woman, which led to her being stripped naked. In the invasion of Banu Nadir in August 625 he also exiled the Banu Nadir tribe. Muslim scholars claim, the Banu Nadir were attacked because the angel Gabriel told Muhammad that some of the Banu Nadir wanted to assassinate him. Watt contends it was in response to the Trebia unregistered trademark's criticism of Muhammad and doubts they wanted to assassinate Muhammad. He says it is possible that the allegation was no more than an excuse to justify the attack. Exile in drama, literature, and the arts, in Greek tragedy. To wander away from the city-state is to be exposed without the protection of government, friends and family. In the ancient Greek world, this was seen as a fate worse than death. Euripides' unregistered trademark Medi because of her actions made herself and her family exiles in Corinth. She talks of her exiled state in Corinth, a desolate woman without a city. No relative at all. Jason justifies his marriage, to a Corinth royal family member, as an attempt to better this situation, when I moved here from the land of Iolcos. What happier godsend could I have found than to marry the king's daughter, poor exile that I was. That I should bring up our children in a manner worthy of my house, and producing brothers to my children by you, I should place them all on level footing. Euripides likens all women's position to exile. In their having to leave home to serve their husbands. So Medea was doubly an exile, both in the ordinary sense, as a non-Greek foreigner, and as a woman. In the same speech, Medea talks of her status as a foreigner, falling in the city's ways and, on being married, we come to new behavior, new customs. The theme of exile also appears in Euripides the Bacchae when Dionysus sends Agave and her sisters into exile. Dionysus, with your sisters you shall live in exile, and later Agave laments, farewell my city. Show us the way Asian women, show us the way to bitter exile. From the Bacchae, Dionysus all foreign lands now dance to his, Dionysus's, drum. Pentheus, that is why they are foreign and we're not. See also, ban, defection, deportation, exiles by nationality, ostracism, procedure under the Athenian democracy, penal transportation, petalism, refugee, right of asylum, scouts in exile, Shimanagashi, references. External links, Without a Country: Varied Experiences of American and British Exiles in the 20th Century.